What if World War III happened tomorrow? A question that sends shivers down the spine of even the most seasoned strategist. It's unthinkable yet possible given the intricate web of global politics, territorial disputes, trade conflicts, and misunderstandings among nations. Imagine this, political tensions starting to bubble, like a pot left unattended on the stove. Countries, with their unique histories and interests, come to loggerheads over issues that seem trivial to an outsider. Yet, these issues have roots that dig deep into the soil of their past, tangled in old grudges and fresh wounds. Territorial disputes over land and resources, trade conflicts that disrupt economies, and misunderstandings that fan the flames of hostility. The global stage becomes a chessboard, and the kings and queens, pawns and knights are all poised for the next move. But what if that next move isn't a diplomatic maneuver or a compromise, but a call to arms? The world, as we know it, would be thrown into disarray. The peace we've enjoyed since the end of World War II would shatter, replaced by the ominous drumbeats of war. Suddenly the hypothetical becomes a grim reality we have to face. Even as we ponder this, it's important to remember that this is not a foregone conclusion. The world isn't destined to fall into World War III. These tensions, these disputes, these conflicts, they're not insurmountable. They can be resolved, but that requires understanding, patience, and a willingness to listen and compromise. But what if that doesn't happen? What if the discussions break down, the patience wears thin, and the willingness to compromise disappears? What if the pot on the stove bubbles over, and the chessboard is flipped in anger? That's when the unthinkable becomes a possibility. That's when the tensions, the disputes, the conflicts, they snowball. They grow and gather momentum until they're no longer just a series of isolated incidents, but a global conflict, a war that engulfs nations and alters the course of history. When disputes among nations snowball, they can lead to a global conflict we'd rather avoid. So, let's hope that if World War III ever does loom on the horizon, we remember the lessons of our past and choose a path of peace instead. Now imagine this, a world under the threat of nuclear war. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? These weapons of mass destruction have an unimaginable capacity for devastation. If you've ever seen footage or photos from Hiroshima or Nagasaki, you'll know what I mean. The destruction was immense, and the effects lingered for generations. If World War III were to break out, the use of nuclear weapons could very well be on the table. It's a terrifying prospect, and it's something the world hasn't faced on such a scale since the Cold War. The mere thought of such firepower being unleashed is enough to make your blood run cold. Imagine cities obliterated in an instant, millions of lives lost in the blink of an eye. The immediate impact would be catastrophic, and the fallout from such an event would be far-reaching and long-lasting. Nuclear weapons don't just destroy buildings and infrastructure, they poison the environment, leaving a toxic legacy that can last for centuries. And it's not just the loss of human life we'd be looking at. The environment would take a tremendous hit. Radioactive fallout could contaminate water, soil, and air, making large areas uninhabitable for humans and wildlife alike. It's a grim picture, isn't it? The use of nuclear weapons would also have a profound psychological impact. The fear, the uncertainty, the knowledge that such destructive power is in the hands of fallible human beings. It would change the way we see the world and each other. It's important to remember, though, that nuclear weapons are not the only threat in a potential World War III scenario. There are many other ways in which such a conflict could cause widespread destruction and loss of life. But the nuclear threat is perhaps the most terrifying because of its sheer destructive power and the long-term consequences it would have for our planet. Unleashing nuclear weapons would result in a catastrophe, causing loss of lives and long-lasting environmental damage. And that's a future we should all strive to avoid. When it comes to money matters, a world war would cause a major shakeup. Picture nations diverting a colossal amount of resources into their military, a redirection that would ripple through the fabric of global trade. The worldwide exchange of goods and services, that delicate dance of supply and demand, would be thrown into chaos. In this tempest of turmoil, the global economy would bear the brunt. With countries focusing on warfare, economic growth takes a back seat, and the financial system can lose its balance. This could lead to a worldwide economic slump, a monster of a recession that would send shockwaves through every sector. Jobs, the lifeline of many households, would be at risk. Income stability would become a luxury as economies reel under the pressure. The impact would be felt by everyone, from the big businesses to the man on the street. A global conflict would severely disrupt the world economy, leading to job losses and income instability. In a global conflict, the human cost is immense. As tensions escalate, so does the risk of widespread displacement. Picture millions of people uprooted from their homes, forced to navigate unfamiliar territories in search of safety. The emotional toll is as devastating as the physical one. This displacement would lead to a massive humanitarian crisis. International aid organizations would face unprecedented strain as they scramble to provide essentials like food, shelter, and medical aid. The logistics of delivering these necessities amidst the chaos of war would be a colossal challenge. Refugee camps would likely spring up, becoming temporary homes for those displaced. These camps, though a sanctuary for some, often grapple with their own issues like overcrowding, disease outbreaks, and shortages of necessities. The scale of this crisis would require a global response. Countries not directly involved in the conflict would need to step up, offering aid and shelter to those fleeing the war zones. Millions would be displaced, creating a massive humanitarian crisis that demands a global response. Our environment wouldn't be spared in a global conflict. Imagine a world where the lush green forests, the flowing rivers, the chirping birds, all are silenced in the blink of an eye. The immediate destruction from warfare would be immense. Missiles, bombs, tanks, they'd tear through the natural world, leaving behind nothing but ruins. But the immediate destruction is just the tip of the iceberg. The long-term damage from nuclear radiation and pollution would be far more devastating. Picture nuclear winter, where the sun's rays are blocked out by a thick layer of dust and smoke, causing temperatures to plummet. The land would become barren, unable to support life. Radiation would creep into the soil, the water, the air. It would linger for years, maybe centuries, damaging every form of life it touches. Plants would wither, animals would perish, and entire ecosystems would collapse. World War III would cause irreversible damage to our ecosystems, affecting all life on Earth. In today's digital age, a new kind of warfare emerges. We're living in a world that's more connected than ever, and this connectivity could become a battleground in a global conflict. Imagine a war not fought only with bullets and bombs, but with bits and bytes. Consider the power of cyber warfare. Countries could use sophisticated computer hacks to disrupt each other's communication networks, throwing military operations into chaos. Power systems, the lifeblood of modern societies, could be sabotaged, plunging cities into darkness and crippling defense capabilities. But it doesn't stop there. Financial infrastructures could become targets too. Picture this: stock markets crashing, banks faltering, economies teetering on the brink of collapse, all because of a few lines of malicious code. With the rise of cyber warfare, the battleground extends beyond physical borders. It seeps into the very fabric of our daily lives, making everyone a potential casualty. Cyber warfare could add another layer of chaos and destruction in a global conflict. In a global conflict, alliances can complicate matters. Ponder on this for a moment. Alliances like NATO, which were initially formed to maintain global peace, could ironically become catalysts in escalating a conflict. Consider a small dispute, a minor disagreement between two nations. In normal circumstances, it might be resolved diplomatically, or worst-case scenario, could lead to a limited skirmish. But factor in alliances and the picture changes drastically. Suddenly, a minor dispute becomes a tug of war, a global game of chess. Allies are bound by treaties to support one another, and this could mean a small fire quickly turns into an inferno. Nations could find themselves dragged into a conflict not of their making, but one they are obligated to join because of alliance commitments. The chessboard of international politics becomes a labyrinth of complexity, with allies and enemies shifting like sand. Alliances can turn a small conflict into a global one, making the situation even more complex. Even amid potential global conflict, the pursuit of peace remains paramount. International organizations like the United Nations would be thrust into the spotlight, tasked with the monumental challenge of diffusing tensions and advocating for diplomatic resolutions. Their role, more critical than ever, would involve mediating dialogues, arbitrating disputes, and promoting international cooperation. These organizations could also provide platforms for nations to voice their concerns, fostering understanding and empathy. This might just be the key to preventing misunderstandings from escalating into full-blown warfare. In the face of a potential World War III, the world would look to these peacekeepers to guide us through the storm, to remind us of our shared humanity and the devastating cost of conflict. Despite the risks of World War III, the global community must strive for peace, because failing to do so means unimaginable loss and damage. So, even in the darkest of times, the pursuit of peace must always shine the brightest.